There had been reports of a leak of radioactive waste outside the harbor from a plant that used atomic isotopes. As a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, I had volunteered to check the area using a new type of underwater radiation detector. So far, there was no evidence of any contamination. My radiation detector had a dial which measured the amount of radioactivity and an audio device which translated it into clicks. This was to be my final dive on the assignment. The entire channel seemed well within the safe limits. I was heading for the surface when it happened. I hadn't noticed a sound mounting in the distance. I was in the direct path of a large freighter, which was approaching overhead. I started to dive to a safe depth. The clicks in my detector were so rapid that I thought something had gone wrong with it. The needle had moved way up into the zone of extreme radioactivity. The reaction was coming from the freighter passing overhead. There was no question of it. I couldn't imagine what it could be carrying to give such a reading. But whatever it was a dangerously hot cargo. I'd have to tip off the Coast Guard immediately. The next morning, I was called in by Commander Greer of the Coast Guard. I figured that he wanted to tell me what they found in the port inspection.
Mike, I personally took charge of our routine inspection, which in this case wasn't routine. You know something? There wasn't a trace of radioactivity aboard that freighter.
Well, that's hard to believe.
Mike, we went over that ship with a fine-tooth comb. It's clean.
But that reading I got, it had to be caused by something extremely radioactive.
Then what happened to it? We're certain that it didn't come ashore and it's not on that ship.
Well, of course, you checked it from above. I was below when I got my reading. If that material were attached to her hull, yet somehow shielded from it, you wouldn't have been able to have detected it from above, would you?
That's true.
You mind if I check it from below again?
Okay, Mike. But be careful. If you're right, it means trouble.
I was careful. I slipped into the water as unobtrusively as possible. I descended to a depth of 40 feet. Then I started swimming toward the freighter. I moved in very cautiously. If my detector had been right, there was enough radioactivity there to cook me. The chain and the prow revealed only a normal background reading. Then I started checking the starboard side of the hull. I kept as close to the hull as possible so my bubbles wouldn't be noticed on the surface.
Sir, those bubbles. Air bubbles from a diver. Where did you first notice them?
Amidship, sir.
He's inspecting our hull.
But we've had port inspection.
I don't like the looks of it.
Colonel, I did exactly as I was instructed.
They know something.
I didn't find a thing. You suppose they got rid of it somehow before they reached port?
You mean on another boat?
Or a sub, maybe.
No. We had that freighter under air surveillance within 2 minutes after your call. There's another explanation. Are you going to be someplace where I can get in touch with you later?
Oh, I'll be at my place. You got my number, haven't you?
All right, I'll call you. I might have an interesting assignment for you.
I had made my own investigation, but I was more puzzled than ever. The next morning, I was at the Coast Guard base on volunteer duty when I saw Commander Greer drive up. Ah, Commander.
Like that assignment that I mentioned. It's been okay. That is, if you still want to volunteer for it.
Just name it.
Remember all those talks we had about the possibility of someday you organizing an underwater flotilla for us?
Don't tell me it's finally going to happen. You mean you're...
I mean, we need that flotilla now.
Oh, that's great.
Now, it's an assignment that's tough. It could be dangerous. How many divers could you have ready for briefing?
Well, I only got about 5, maybe 6 in my regular flotilla that I consider, experienced enough for a job like this.
All right, you use your own discretion about that. Now, Mike, what I tell you now is for the moment strictly confidential.
Yeah.
This is going to be an underseas hunt, Mike, for that radioactive material. Notify your men to report here for briefing at 1700 hours. Tell them as little as possible, except that they have to volunteer. It's confidential and dangerous.
The deck of a Coast Guard cutter served as our briefing room. I explained our plan of search in detail.
Well, Mike, we still don't know exactly what we're looking for.
No, we don't know what it looks like, or what size it is. It could be very small. But we do know that it's something so radioactive that it could fry us if we get too close to it for too many seconds. That's why we'll be working with an underwater radiation detector like this one. It'll be our main protection.
Is there any chance of it exploding?
No, it's not an atomic bomb. My detector wouldn't have given me a reading if it were. But radiation and contamination are just as dangerous. Any more questions? We have got a couple of things working in our favor, though. One of them is water. It's a very good shield against radiation. And the other, of course, is this little gadget. Just be sure that you keep your eyes glued to it every second while you're down there, huh?
One more thing, gentlemen. Although this is the first underwater mission for a flotilla, there may never be a more important one. Whatever it is those people dropped, we've got to find it before they can get it ashore. More depends upon this than you can realize.
Well, I think we've covered about everything. Better start getting organized now. Looks like tomorrow's going to be a big day. Yeah, I'll check you out separately on this counter here, huh? Commander Greer and I had chosen the area for the search based on what we knew of the freighter's course. What's the matter, Commander? Something wrong?
No, I was curious about that boat over there, but I guess it's just one of those harbor fishing boats.
Looks like we're going to get a break. Nice day.
That Coast Guard cutter. It's got divers aboard. They're on our course.
Give orders to head back.
I'm giving the orders. We'll maintain our course. Notify me when we've reached the spot.
If those other divers see you down there, you won't...
I'll be one of them. In these outfits with the masks on, all divers look alike.
We had reached the sector charted for our first dive, the one that we thought most likely to hold our target. Our underwater search had begun. It was carefully planned and systematic. The cutter was set on a known course at a steady speed. timed signals, we were dropping markers so that they would hit the bottom at 30-foot intervals. The markers were concrete hemispheres, striped for easy spotting. We had attached inflated buoys to the concrete blocks on long lines. These buoys would be our surface markers. When all the markers were overboard, we turned and retraced our course. This time, a diver jumped off and submerged next to each floating buoy. Each diver immediately swam down to his concrete marker on the bottom. To see that they followed the correct procedure after that. The plan was for each diver to tie the line that he carried to the marker and swim in a wide circular pattern. He had to watch and listen to the underwater radiation detector all the time. The lines were long enough so that the patterns would overlap. My flotilla members were good divers, but none of them had ever before had to conduct an underwater operation with such discipline and precision. Another diver was preparing to submerge. He was not part of our group. I was in command of the first underwater flotilla of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. We had volunteered to find a tiny bit of dangerously radioactive, hot cargo lying somewhere in acres of ocean bottom. We were so occupied with our work that we didn't notice the arrival of another diver, differently equipped. He studied our actions. Nearing the end of our first diving period. In a few minutes, we'd complete the pattern of the first sector. Then we'd have to surface for rest and for a full set of tanks. Stan began to get a slightly higher reading on his meter from an object that he discovered in the bottom. Followed instructions and immediately inflated a marker buoy. I saw the metal container that he'd found, I thought that our search was over. But I soon saw that the reading wasn't anywhere near high enough. I sent Stan right up, as our maximum safe time was over. My tank had only a few minutes of air left, too. I was going to surface with the others when I saw another diver. I could see immediately that he wasn't one of the flotilla, because he was carrying a long boat hook. Somehow I sensed what he was going to do with it. Unless I was very mistaken, he would lead me right to what we were searching for. I stayed as far behind as I could without losing him. His objective, and I saw it. I knew that there was no mistake this time. It was a lead cylinder with a plate on it that might have held it to a hull. The diver was attaching a line to the container. He was using the boat hook to keep as far away from the radiation as possible. He started to tow away the cylinder. I knew I had almost no airlift. I also knew that I couldn't let this diver get away. I wasn't sure how far we were from the cutter, but I had to follow him. When the diver surfaced next to a boat with one end of the line, I figured that he'd soon start towing the cylinder away. I'd have to do something fast. The only thing that I could think of was to cut the line, but I couldn't get too close to the container for too long. It was hot, all right. My knife cut through the fiber strands, but the line had a wire core. The line was being hauled up. I tried to keep my distance from the cylinder.
Why he hasn't surfaced yet, sir. You'd better get down there with your boys. Come on, fellas. Let's find out what happened to Mike.
Start the engines. Let's get out of here.
Then I heard the motor starting. The propeller wasn't engaged yet. If I could wrap the line in it and get away in time, I might cut the line or stop the boat.
The screw must be fouled. I'm going down again. We can't get stuck here.
He saw me. I knew I had less than a minute of air left. If I didn't disarm him in that time, I was finished. Experienced diver. He knew all the tricks. I had already gone into my emergency air supply. Now it was running out. I knew that it was only a matter of seconds before I was helpless. Was gone. I took my last breath. He realized that I was out of air. He knew all that he had to do was to keep me from surfacing. I'd be dead in seconds. Almost blacked out when my flotilla arrived and pulled the diver off me. Stan realized that I needed air. He quickly gave me some from his air hose. The diver was still struggling viciously, but he was no match for an underwater flotilla. The hot cargo into a heavy lead container underwater. And that way, the water shielded us somewhat from the radiation. Now it was being carefully brought aboard. I knew that Commander Greer was anxious to have a description of the capsule. It's a lead cylinder, about 3 feet long, about 7 inches in diameter, with a steel plate attached to it. I guess the whole thing was attached to the bottom of the boat with an electromagnet inside. When they wanted to get rid of it, they just switched off the current.
That's it, all right.
That's what?
Mike, when I gave you the go-ahead, I'd received a report that I couldn't discuss.
That figures.
Now, this is still strictly for you. But you see, intelligence knew all about that container. Everything except where and how. It's packed with radioactive cesium powder.
Cesium?
The idea was to have it handy to slip into the water supply at a crucial moment.
Oh, boy. That could have wiped out hundreds of thousands of people.
Could have. Thanks.
Oh, you got nothing to worry about now, Commander. It's perfectly safe.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for volunteering and for the great job that you've done. Those men you captured have been turned over to the FBI. But there won't be any headlines about this incident, and your pictures won't be in the papers. You can't tell your family and your friends about it. So the only ones who'll know are the bunch of us right here and Coast Guard headquarters in Washington. And you can be very sure that they'll know. And that the first thing that'll be said about our first underwater flotilla is, well done. Well done.
I'll be back next week at the same time with another Sea Hunt story. Plan to be with us again, huh? recent years, the Florida coastline, like other attractive water areas, has become a mecca for skin diving enthusiasts. Tourists who didn't know a regulator from a mouthpiece were able to learn the rudiments of this fabulous sport from Julian Lobeck and George Turner, who ran a skin diving school out of Miami. After 20 hours of instruction and training, graduation was an underwater trip to a group of rocks and caves some 4 miles offshore. Several times I'd been along on the Lobeck-Turner graduation trip, but not this time. Not the time that Julian managed to slip away from the group. He headed toward a spot where he knew a very special package had been carefully hidden for him. What he didn't know was that his partner, George Turner, was following him. George grabbed the package from him, signaled him to surface. Instead, Julian pulled his knife. There was no point now in putting the mouthpiece back in George's mouth. George was beyond air, beyond help of any kind. Julian got rid of the incriminating package in a hurry. The students were coming aboard now.
Help you with that.
Well, Teach, how did we do?
Fine. You all passed with swimming colors.
Where's George?
Well, I don't know. Wasn't he with you?
No, we thought he was with you.
Well, he's been down too long. Looks like trouble. Don, call the Coast Guard. Tell them we need help.
I'm a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. That day, my boat was the nearest to Julian Lobeck's. When I heard the distress call on the radio, I checked in and volunteered to take the call. I was particularly anxious not only because a diver was reported lost, but because I knew both Julian and George personally. 10 minutes later, I was aboard the Swan, and the students were telling me what they knew about the so-called accident. Julian was underwater, still searching, so they said. But he surfaced a moment later.
There he is.
I made several passes through the area, Mike. Not a trace.
Now, let's get another try, Julian.
Mike, this now it's hopeless.
No harm trying. Show me where you last saw him.
Okay.
Julian showed me the area where he claimed he had last seen George. We made several passes searching for some sign of him. It wasn't until later, Much later that I learned why he had deliberately led me in the wrong direction. Hours later, a Coast Guard cutter, still searching the surface, came upon George Turner's body. The coroner's report established that death was due to a knife wound inflicted by a person or persons unknown. Coast Guard headquarters opened an immediate investigation. Commander Tugwell invited me to be present.
Like only yesterday, we're diving from the end of a pier for pennies, and now... I just don't understand it. Everybody liked George.
Somebody didn't. Your partner was involved in a struggle before his face mask was lost.
What about the students, the tourists who were with you? Have you any reason to believe it?
Nothing there, Mike. However, we've asked them all to remain in Miami for the next 48 hours. That's all, Mr. Lovick. Oh, if you happen to remember anything or hear anything, would you please let us know?
I sure will, Commander.
I'll see you, Julie. Well, if everybody checks out clean in the Swan, the killer obviously had to come from some other boat, huh?
There wasn't another vessel within a mile of the Swan.
Well, what about another skin diver? I mean, someone who wasn't on the Swan.
But why?
Well, if we could pinpoint the spot where George was killed, we might find out why.
Maybe we can. Come with me.
Of a civilian official, we went to work immediately. First, we marked the spot on the chart where George's body was found. The coroner's report was able to tell us how long George had been dead at the time his body was discovered. From the Oceanographic Institute, we were able to get the average speed of the current during the time the body was in the water, and also the direction of the current. Then, multiplying the speed of the current by 26 hours, Commander Tugwell was able to get the approximate distance that the body had traveled. That, plus the direction of the current, helped us locate the approximate area where George had met his death. I went out with Commander Tugwell aboard a cutter to see if I could find anything underwater in this area that might give us a clue to the mystery. George's face mask was missing. I hoped that I might find it.
This is it, Mike. We're right in the middle of our search area.
If I'm lucky, I might find one of these down there. Looking for a face mask on the floor of the ocean is like searching for a needle in a haystack. One fractional error in our calculations and I could end up miles from where the struggle occurred. Two air tanks later, I saw something in the distance. Up close, it proved to be what I'd hoped for.
It's his, all right. His initials are on it.
Yeah, I see.
Should have thought of this area from the beginning.
How come?
The underwater caves. The graduation hall for Lobeck Skin Diving School.
But Julian sent us off in another direction.
Yeah, I know he did. I'm going back and search the same area again. Might find something else.
This search was to produce something new and unexpected. I had no idea what the small plastic bag could be, but it was worth taking to the surface.
The break we've been waiting for. About 6 months ago, we were notified by CIA that Miami might be the message center for an espionage ring dealing in sabotage.
What?
Yeah. In spite of every precaution and every possible surveillance, we knew that instructions were being brought into the country and we couldn't figure out who was doing it.
Oh, you mean George and Julian, huh?
Simple and clever. A skin diving school is a front to bring in microfilm containers. They've become so much a part of the waterfront, nobody even thought of them.
I still don't understand. How did the microfilm get there?
If a skin diver from the Swan can swim to the caves, a skin diver from a ship beyond the limits can swim to meet him.
Yeah, that doesn't answer your question, though. Why did they kill George?
Maybe the FBI can find the answer in here. Meantime, I think we'd better have another session with Julian.
The Coast Guard was searching for Julian Lobeck, but someone else had been searching for him too, and had found him.
Notice the natural design of this driftwood, worn smooth by the erosion of the sea. Thing of beauty, tremendous resilience. It has been conditioned by the very forces which shaped it. But you, my friend, have not been conditioned to treachery. In fact, you're quite the novice. So let's have none of it. Where's the other package?
The what?
There were 2 packages in the delivery. You brought me only 1.
Well, I brought what I found.
Would you trade your life for a little plastic bag?
But I haven't got it. I never did.
My boy, that package has no value to you, but I assure you a great deal to me. Your life isn't worth a fig until I get it.
I haven't got it, believe me. I'd give it to you if I could, believe me. Maybe I lost it when George and I...
I'm waiting. The rest of it?
George found out I was working for you. He told me to quit. And when I told him I wouldn't, he followed me to the cave and he tried to take the package from me. We got into a fight and when I saw what happened, I headed back to the Swan. And when I climbed aboard, I realized I was holding the package.
2 packages.
1 package. You gotta believe me.
I do. I want you to go back and get the other package. Find it.
But the Coast Guard's all over that area.
You'll pick it up this afternoon. We're expecting another delivery at the caves. You can kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Oh, no.
My boy, you have no choice. You will do as you are told.
But the Coast Guard.
You have no choice. This afternoon at 4.
It'll never hold up.
I know. It will be your mission to cast the first stone. And be sure the right bird is the target.
Yes, sir.
It was turning out to be a bad day for Julian all around.
Mr. Lobeck, do you have any idea why we should call you back?
No.
Have you remembered anything which might have slipped your mind during our first conversation?
No, sir, not a thing. Where'd you find him?
Where he was killed, near the underwater caves.
What's that?
Microfilm? Instructions for enemy agents in this country?
Enemy agents? Look, please believe me. I didn't know what was in that package. I thought it was jewels or something.
Now, what about your partner, George Turner? Was he involved in all this?
George was clean, Snow White. He died trying to stop me. We got into a fight. I killed him for a lousy $500.
How? How?
$100 a pickup. I made 5 of them for Seminard.
Who is Seminard?
He owns a driftwood shop out in East El Dorado. He ships the stuff out in the driftwood. Look, he's the one you want, not me. I'm no spy.
No, you're not a spy. You're just a man who kills his partner.
Look, that was an accident. I didn't mean to kill him, I swear. It was an accident.
Oh, what next, Commander? Shall we, wrap up Seminard?
It's no good if he ships the film out. We've got to grab him with the evidence in his possession.
There's another pickup scheduled for this afternoon at 4.
And you're the messenger?
Yes.
Unfortunately, you'll be in custody of the FBI.
Well, maybe I can do the job for him, Commander. I mean, take his place, huh?
Look, you want to play ball?
What do you mean?
You're up against a murder charge and an espionage charge. You want to make it hard on yourself or easy?
Commander, I'll do anything at this point. Anything.
Then you'll help us pull a switch on your friend Seminard.
At 3:35 that afternoon, Seminard and his strong-arm man were out at sea.
We're now as far from the rendezvous as Julian should be in 25 minutes.
I'll be waiting for him.
With ample time to make your preparations, we can't afford any more mistakes. Let us be neat and efficient and get it over with before we attract the attention of the Coast Guard.
The diver was carrying a large net as he swam to the cave that had been set up as the rendezvous for that afternoon. Even if I had known that, I couldn't have guessed what he planned to do with it. Once in the cave, he slipped a dummy microfilm packet from his belt and started rigging a booby trap. Julian brought the Swan to her usual anchor spot promptly at 4 o'clock. He slipped into the cabin, ostensibly to get into a scuba. He was in wetsuit for a good reason. I was in my wetsuit, ready to take his place, while the FBI took Julian back into custody. Our theory was that we might be observed, and the wetsuit would serve to make us both look alike. And we were observed. I approached the cave cautiously and swam inside on the alert for a possible ambush. I spotted the familiar plastic microfilm bag. Caution warned me to look twice. I saw a wire that was hooked to it. Almost immediately, a diver launched himself at me. Realizing that I had found his booby trap, he didn't waste a minute attacking the man that he thought was Julian. I don't know whether it was his fin or mine. I tripped the booby trap. We found ourselves caught in the net that had been intended for Julian. I disarmed him. Now I tried to make him understand that we were both dead ducks unless he stopped struggling. He got the message. I could breathe easy while I cut through the net. When he tried to get out too, it was too late. I had him in the bag, and that's just the way I wanted him.
Nice work, Mike.
Who's he?
Mr. Seminard, you've heard his name bandied about.
Oh, I sure have.
Our helicopter spotted his boat in the vicinity and we picked him up. He doesn't want to talk, but we think he may change his mind.
Especially after this character explains why he tried to kill me.
Probably thought it was me. The Seminard strong-arm man.
I have no connection with this fellow. I've never seen him before in my life.
You crummy liar! I've worked for you for 5. Never mind. We know enough about the two of you to put this story together. Unless you'd like to save us the trouble.
I might as well. Because you just can't trust anyone.
Can't trust anyone when you're selling out your country, that's for sure. Go on. Hello there. I'm Lloyd Bridges. You know, 3/5 of the world is covered by the sea. And how little most of us know about that underwater world. Go below with us again next week, huh? For another thrilling adventure in Sea Hunt. I was on my way to a rendezvous with a Coast Guard cutter in a busy harbor. Overnight, the harbor had been paralyzed into total inactivity. The ship had been trying to reach port after an internal explosion. But it had gone down just a few minutes too soon. It was in the worst possible place, right in the heart of the main channel, blocking everything. Ordinarily, the ship would be easy to refloat or clear away. But now everything had stopped cold. The first workmen down had discovered that the ship was radioactive. They'd gotten out of there fast. Now the scientists and the Coast Guard had taken over. When I found out what the problem was, I volunteered as a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I was to check the ship with a waterproof radiation counter to confirm just how dangerous it might be. Though no amount of radioactivity underwater could contaminate the harbor, it was important to find out if the ship itself could be worked on. So far, the Geiger readings seemed to be normal. Suddenly, they took a tremendous jump. I stayed just long enough to spot the source of the trouble. Then I left in a hurry. That sign and the red danger flag spelled out the same message. Keep away.
Signs of contamination so far.
It was plenty hot down there, though. I thought this radiation cutter was going to jump right out of my head.
Just exactly what did you see down there?
Something pretty eerie. Inside that special cabin, Cabin X, there was quite a bit of debris. Within that debris and around it was a sort of a bluish-green glow.
Cherenkov radiation.
What's that?
You get that when radioactive rays are escaping and affect water molecules. It produces a halo, just as you described.
Is it dangerous?
Very. It means that the radioactive capsule is open and the capsule is lying loose. It couldn't be worse.
You know, I thought I saw a lead bucket down there, like this one. It was over on its side, and the lid was off.
That's what it was. An explosion of compressed gas within the capsule container. What Mike calls the lead bucket. And now the radioactive slug is lying loose.
What can we do now?
Well, what we need is a universal coffin.
Not for me, I hope.
It's a thing about the size of a large cannon. Has a long hollow center. Weighs about 20 ton. We use it to handle radioactive slugs through the hollow with a long-handled pole.
Well, it'd be impossible for me to handle something like that down there.
Fortunately, water tends to compress and confine radiation. We have this lead shield.
If it were lowered into position, you and your partner, the one we are assigning to you, could work from behind it. What you will have to do is get a grip on the radioactive pellet with this device on the end of the pole and lift it back into an undamaged container.
Well, that much shouldn't be too difficult.
Except for one thing, the Rankine count. That's the amount of radiation your body can absorb.
Well, That's going to be blocked by the lead shield. I mean, that's what it's for, isn't it?
Even with the lead shield, your time is extremely limited, especially when you get a grip on the radioactive pellet and swing it far out in front of you. And though the pole is a long one, nevertheless, one slip could cause a long, agonizing death from an overdose of radiation.
Well, you said that I was going to have a partner. I'll take care of the diving safety. Let him handle the pole.
He wouldn't be able to do that as well as you. And besides, he's needed to watch the Rankin count and take care of radiation safety. Your lives will depend on it. And besides, he wouldn't have your reach with the pole.
Why? Is he that small?
Actually, he isn't a he. He's a she. One of the first 6 graduates of radiation biology.
Hi.
How do you do, Mr. Nelson? Has he been briefed?
Partially. Miss Kenyon was flown in because she is a proficient scuba diver as well as a radiation safety expert. It will be her job to see to your safety from the moment you approach Cabin X until you get back up here.
That's great. Looks like this job's going to be a very pleasant one.
I doubt that very much, Mr. Nelson. There won't be anything pleasant about it. The outer layer of your skin is only 0.02 of an inch thick. You'll need a little more protection than that wetsuit.
Mike, Miss Kenyon is obviously a pretty girl, but she is also a top-ranked scientist. She is one of the best specialists working within the National Committee on Radiation Protection. She and she alone will determine your tolerance limits.
I may look like the chummy type, but I'm not that chummy. Am I understood?
Okay, boss.
So far as I was concerned, Susie was still on trial. I had no doubt that she was well qualified, but things can be very different underwater. One more item had been added to our equipment before we came down. Underwater telephones. Each of us was wearing a throat mic and a headset connecting us with the surface. If anything went wrong unexpectedly, the men on the deck above us would know, from Susie's reports, exactly what had happened. Shield, along with our wetsuits and gloves, would give us enough protection to enable us to work. But the radioactivity from the deadly pellet could penetrate almost anything that close, if there was any carelessness whatsoever. The shield would be a help, but it was no guarantee of safety. I had to give Susie credit. She put her shoulder right into the work. reminded me again that my time would be severely limited. 10 minutes. I was reluctantly concluding that I might have been unfair about Susie. She did seem to handle herself very ably, both as a specialist in radiation safety and as a diver. There was a sureness in her movements and decisions that spoke well for her, and that I was genuinely glad to see. I've known quite a few undersea dangers. Moray eels, sharks, killer whales. But at least they were things that you could see and feel and fight. Radiation sickness was something else again. Something that almost literally could melt the bones in the strongest body. Just the thought of it made my flesh crawl. But this definitely was the wrong time to think about it.
Sarenka radiation much stronger. Surrounding debris being moved aside. Nelson exposed, reaching around shield. Roentgen count rising. Still a good margin on absorption limits. Clear evidence of gamma rays. Handling pole should have been just a little bit longer. Nelson was leaned too far beyond shield. Tolerance time will have to be reduced. Roentgen count at 30.
It's rising much too fast.
The rate of radiation absorption?
Yes. She'll have to be extremely alert, and sometimes that's very difficult when you're working underwater.
Cabin litter pushed aside. Pellet now fully visible. Roentgen count much higher. Dosage near 50.
Dosage near 50. I don't like that. Susie! Susie!
Roentgen count going up rapidly. I'm terminating.
Each time I had leaned around the shield, I had suffered a direct exposure. My fate rested entirely on Susie's judgments of the dosage levels of radiation. If she had done her job well, I still had a safe margin. If not, I was in the worst kind of trouble. My assignment was to retrieve a deadly radioactive capsule and restore it to a lead container without exposing myself to gamma radiation that could take my life. Radiation specialist Susie Kenyon was diving with me to see that I didn't absorb more than the maximum permissible dosage. She and her fellow scientist, Bryant Henry, were checking sensitive strips of film. I'd been wearing them inside my wetsuit to help determine whether I had already received a critical absorption.
What's the verdict? You gonna operate?
There is a definite blackening.
And the microscope showed signs of proton tracks. But you're still well on the safe side. Miss Kenyon seems to be taking very good care of you.
She is indeed.
I think he can certainly make at least one more dive.
One more trip down should do it.
Okay, back into your wetsuits, both of you.
The time had come to go for broke. The radioactive capsule was out where it could be snagged. This was the lead container in which the capsule had to be placed. It would be a delicate, nerve-wracking job, and handled with care would be written all over it. But I felt very confident now that the job could be done, barring the unexpected.
Container now in position. Roentgen count being resumed. Considerable capsule contamination is apparent. Sarenkov halo is much more pronounced than before. now reaching for pellet. Water movement has pushed it just a little further out of reach than before. Nelson, well out beyond shielding, taking much greater exposure. Absorption time limit must be reduced further. Ren can count it. Ren can count.
Miss Kenyon! Miss Kenyon! Susie! Mike, is there anything wrong with Miss Kenyon? Check, please! Check, please!
The unexpected had happened. It was Susie who had been stricken. With what, I didn't know. And I hated to guess.
Well, whatever it was had nothing to do with radiation.
Oh, sure it couldn't. Suddenly, I felt like I was smothering.
I know what happened to you. You just forgot to breathe, that's all. Now, we've been working under too much tension.
I was very tense, but I wouldn't forget to breathe.
You had plenty of air in your tank, but you just weren't breathing enough of it. And underwater, air starvation like that can blank you out all of a sudden.
Now that I know what it is, I can watch for it. I'll get my gear.
No, you won't. You're staying put. No more diving for you for, at least 4 hours.
Okay, boss.
4 hours? It'll be dark by then.
Then we can't resume until tomorrow.
Yeah, that capsule is lying free down there. Any strong water movement, no telling what might happen to it. It's got to be put back into its container right now.
You're willing to go down there alone?
Do we have a choice? I think it'll work out all right. You can still guide me and time me by phone from up here.
I'm not so sure.
Susie's got all the dope. The Rankin count so far, and the absorption rate working around the shield. You figure out the very lowest tolerance limit possible, and I'll abide by it. When you say terminate, I'll terminate.
You promise?
Susie, I've seen the effects of radiation on metal. I keep imagining what it might do to the human body. Believe me, I wouldn't want that to happen to me.
Mike, I shouldn't let you try it.
There are quite a few scientists in your field who shouldn't try certain things, but they do, every day.
But letting you go down there alone is still a bad risk.
It's gotta be done. Thanks, Susie. Sorry.
They had figured out precisely how much time I'd have before I passed the absolute tolerance limit. 3 minutes, no more. Even so, I had to remain in the shelter of the shield as much as possible. I was even using the handling pole now to remove the top from the lead container because of its exposed position beyond the shield. Henry's voice telling me that 1 minute was gone. Now I had only 2 minutes left in which to snag the capsule itself and slide it into the container.
One minute plus 30 seconds.
Capsule hard to hold, slipping off prong. keep trying. Give me countdown in seconds, please.
1 minute, 59 seconds, 58 seconds, 57 seconds.
I was too anxious. I knew it. It was hard not to be anxious, knowing how swiftly the seconds were slipping by.
"30 seconds, 29, 28.
There could be no fumble now. There'd be no time to try again. Once I swung it out, the radiation dosage would be at its peak. It'd have to be done in one smooth motion.
Two, 1, 0. Terminate. Terminate! Terminate! Acknowledge, please. Acknowledge! Terminate!
Mike, terminate!
Got it. Capsule in. Sealing container. Terminating.
I still don't know how you read these things.
Take my word for it, you're still intact. But you've carried your radiation count to the absolute limit. For the next 2 months, you'd better not even have a tooth x-ray.
Well, I wasn't worried. I was just petrified a little, that's all.
Just the same, we'll keep you under close observation for at least 2 weeks. Susie, that'll be your sign.
Starting with dinner tonight?
Starting with dinner tonight.
Kind of thing. Hello there. I'm Lloyd Bridges. Skin diving is fun and adventure for young and old, but it can be dangerous. So know the sport well and don't take any chances. Be with you next week for another exciting sea hunt.